yeah, so we're going to start by going over some pens, and then we will go from there. And I don't know where my handout is, but we'll start with the set that I had you guys get is the Faber-Castell. And where's it? There it is. It depends on the set you got, and if you didn't get these, that's fine, because there's a big variety, and actually these are not my favorite, but they're readily available. So the set that I have says extra small, small, medium, and B for brush. Some sets that some of the students had the last time I did this class, they had different marking on there, so it might have said, I think, like 0.1 or 0.3, that kind of. So different pens will have it different, marked differently. So I think the extra small is probably, if I were comparing it to this set, and this set I just found recently, and it is one you have to order. It's this is a 0.2, and that's pretty similar. This one's a little smaller. So this pen might be a 0.3. Yeah, that's pretty close. Okay. So when let me grab a book. Just need something with a piece of paper. Okay. So when I mark with this, these kinds of pens, a lot of the time you have to be kind of up on the tip, because if you're over on the side, it will just be a scratchy mark. It won't give you a nice clean line. So it depends on the brand. Let me see if this one's better. So if I'm over on its edge, this one works pretty good on the side. So that's kind of one of the reasons why these can be a little finicky, especially the smaller pen in this group. So then that was the small, extra small. This is the small. Also, if you have used these for a while, the tips do wear out. So or they just run out of ink. So you may notice that. This is the medium, and this is about a 0.7 in its thickness. And then the brush pen is it is a harder surface tip, so it's probably like a felt tip pen, but you can go pretty wide with it, and then you can also come up on the tip and do thin lines. So I kind of, I don't know, yeah, I go back and forth. I tend to like the smaller tips mostly, but these are kind of nice because then you can, as long as you're working with it and holding it up on the tip, you can get both thin and then come down and go thicker with it and get a variety, a line edge. Okay, so I'm going to put that one back over there. So these are considered technical pens. There is another whole line of technical pens. So you can get microns, you can get them in color. So this is, it should be sepia. It is, I believe it's sepia. And this is a Japanese brand, and it's, but it's going to be nice and kind of warm brown. And then they have the black. This is this is a brush pen. So their brush pen, and it has a tip that will bend over a little bit more, so it's not quite as movable as a brush pen that I have over there, but you can get really thin and thick lines with it. Okay, so there's those. These guys are a professional pen and then it's acid-free permanent by Accurate is the brand, and I believe this one's Accurate as well. And just really nice line. And also, I'm noticing that this thin line right here is darker than what the Faber-Castell was. So the ink is a little different in these. Okay. So those guys are ones that once it's done, you basically throw them out. Or if the tip wears out, I don't know that they do replacement tips for those. This is called a Copic multiliner, and it is waterproof pigment ink. And pigment ink would be like acrylic type of ink. It's going to dry and it will not wash off. And these do have tips that you can take off and replace. And then it has, if I can get in there, it has a tube that you can also replace with the ink. So you could, buy the pen, and over time, if you need to replace it, it will, you're not throwing every part of it away. And it has a nice feel to it. It's got a little bit of weight, and the size of the pen is good. This one, though, is one that if you have it on its side, it's not going to draw very well. So you end up having to draw with it more up. So if you're using your pen and it feels like it's just not working, try tipping it up and see how it goes for you. Remove those because they're a different category altogether. These are also technical pens, but they are by a company called Graphic, which is Derwent is the actual company, and Graphic is probably their brand of marker. And these guys are, whoops, I'm going to use the darker one. These are like graphite, this particular color. So if you're wanting the look of a pencil, you could use these, and it's a gray. So it feels to me when I'm drawing with them that it's like I'm using my mechanical pencil. But the reason that I like them is it keeps me from being too picky with my drawing. And, oh, I need to erase there, and I need to erase there, and just putting the pen down and using it. So I like those and that color. I think they have other colors. And then we move into the brush pens, and brush pens come in a variety. These are, oops, a couple of the different ones from the Jet Pens company that I was showing you that handout for. This is Tombow, and their brush pen has a tip that's very flexible, but it's some kind of a plastic, I think. And you can get up on it, but you can also flatten it out and use it that way. This is a really nice deep ink that's on that one. And so I'll let you guys borrow these. If you want to try any of them, you're welcome to. This is, I believe, Kentucky. Let me see. Nope, Zebra. And the Zebra has a cartridge that you can put in there. It comes with that, so you can refill. And the tip on this one can really lay down too, and you can also come up on the edge of it. So this is a more graphic look, that darker pen. And I use it every now and then for something, but like I said, I tend to like the thinner line. This is my favorite brush pen. This is by Pentel, and it actually looks like a brush. So it has the bristles that are probably synthetic, that are very movable. So you can get really nice thin lines with it, and then you can lay it down and just basically paint with it if you wanted to fill something in. And this was also from Jet Pens. Let's see, you saw the Faber-Castells, and then this is Pigma, and it is a small brush pen. It doesn't give you as wide a line, but it has a nice thin tip to it, so it would be an okay one. And it doesn't, I imagine it's waterproof as well. Then I have a couple sets here. So this is the newer set that I bought. It's called Super Black Ultimate Fine Line. It's permanent, waterproof, and acid-free, and it has from a 0.2, the really thin line, all the way up to a brush. And so you can get a really wide variety of line marks in with this, and it's waterproof, so it's a nice set to have. And I don't know for the brush, I think it looks like it's a felt tip, yeah. So it's not going to tip over like this last one did that I showed you, and it's got a softer tip to it, so it's not going to get as, it's going to be really hard to get a thin line with that one. And then this set I really like. This is by Statler, And you can find this at Hobby Lobby is where I got this one, but I'm sure you can find it on, or not Hobby Lobby, Michael's. I'm sure you can find it online as well. It is a German-made brand, and it says that it will last up to 18 hours open. So you could be drawing with it outside or just wherever, or forget to close it, and it's going to remain nice and not dry out for you. Now, it's one of those things, again, that if I'm on the side, it's not going to work, but if I get up on the tip of it, it works well. And I like them. And there's sizes that they have in here. Okay, so three more. This pen, these are by Pentel, and they're called Hybrid Technica, and it is kind of like a gel pen, so I can use it. I can also shade with it if I want, but it is not waterproof. So then, I need a brush. When I come over it with a brush, and I'll do a quick, should be, let me move these things out of the way. Okay, so when I come over these guys, there's a little bit of bleeding on that one, but I think I put that one down recently. So when you're working with ink, I would give it 2 or 3 minutes, and then depending on the ink line, so that one, I don't remember what pen that was, but it's not holding. These guys are all good. That one's good. Darn, I wish I remember which pen that was. And then when I hit this, it moves, but it leaves the line. So you get a gradation of a gray so that you can shade with it. And on the handout, the bird, that is this guy, the chickadee. That's how I did that one, was to come in once I had drawn the bird in there, and then I used my brush to come in and just wake up that ink a little bit, and used it to shade it. And you don't have to fill in completely then. So if you look at that handout, the top of the bird's head has little marks like they're lines for the feathers, but I didn't completely fill it in. I used the ink to do that. So yeah, so you can then, what also you can do with that is once you have woken the paint up and wet it, or not the paint, the ink, I believe then it kind of gets set. So that first hit of water sets the ink line, and it should be, it should be that one, I think it's in there, yeah. So the last two are, you can also get pens that you can refill, and these are fountain pens, and they need a specific kind of ink, because if you put a regular ink in it, it has some drying things in it that can clog up your pen. So you need to make sure that it says it's ink for a fountain pen. You can also just buy fountain pens that have like these guys, the little tubes that you can buy and refill. But I decided I wanted to buy a pen that I could refill and not have to buy the tubes all the time. So this brand of ink is a brand called Noodlers, and I was looking for one that would be nice and dark. And so on that Jet Pens handout, I kind of went through the inks and was trying to look and find something that would be good. This particular pen has a little piece of metal here, and then the rubber tubing that the ink goes up into. So you just kind of put it below the surface just a little bit, and then squeeze back and forth until it starts to fill that well reservoir up, and attach that, and then I'll go ahead and clean off the extra. And then it just works really well, and depending on the tip that you buy, some tips will be, you know, stay pretty narrow, or you might be able to spread them out just a little bit by putting more pressure on it. Some tips for fountain pens, you can get some that are even wider, and I'm wearing ink now. Okay. So we'll let it one sit. And then the other kind of pen that you can get, where'd it go? Oh, here it is. Are the handle, and then you buy the pieces that insert into it for different kinds of tips. And these actually were, these metal tips were some that my grandpa had, and I have a box full of this specific number. So this is a rounded tip, and so different pens will do different things for you. So if you like this idea and playing with it that way, I just bought this bottle and haven't filled it yet, but eventually I'll put some ink in there, and then I can, I believe, yeah, I can use it with my ink pen. And you can also get colored inks. So this is by Daler Rowney, and it should be it's an acrylic ink. And so I just, instead of using it out of that bottle and possibly spilling that bottle, I decided to pour some into a container. And you need it to kind of pull up on the back of the pen just a little bit for it to hold enough that you can use it. And when you first buy these kinds of tips, I think they have some kind of a waxy substance on them that you need to clean them with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Okay, so there's that. And then this is the Higgins brand of black ink. And they usually, not all of them, but most of them usually have some kind of a little dropper that you can put some ink into some other thing. Here it is. Come on. And so then that would be the black. So it's really nice and deep and dark. So, and this kind of pen is fun because you can get lots of really thin lines with it, and then, like I said, depending on how much pressure you give it, you can go darker with it. So, and it kind of makes you feel back like you're in the, I don't know, 14th century, 15th century or something, playing with it. So, okay. So the first thing we are going to do is I will have you guys just go take out your pens, and if you bought a sketchbook, you can take them out and try making some lines with it. Write what the pen is. If it's all if it's all Faber-Castell, you don't necessarily have to write the pen, but you might want to put it's a 0.1 or it's a 0.3. Make some lines, let it dry for a few minutes, and then, like I did here, I did that same thing on all of these where I took some water and I just washed over the one side of those lines to see if it moves, if the ink moves at all. So that way you'll know when you're going to use them, is it going to move? And then you're welcome to come up if you want to try any of these, and then I would just mark what it is. So the first thing will be to make a page sort of like this. If you want to mess around with the pen on another piece of paper, you're welcome to do that. And if you did not bring a sketchbook, if you have a piece of watercolor paper or you have a block, you could use that as well. And I'll talk about some sketchbooks in a little bit, but basically a block, does everybody know what a block is? Mm-hmm. So a block is where they take pieces of paper and they lay them all together, they glue the edges, and then once you're done with your drawing or your watercolor or whatever, usually it's watercolor because that's why they do it, you put something that's thin, like a ruler or a palette knife, under that edge, and then you can take off that top page. It holds the edges so that the paper's not going to buckle while you're painting on it, and I really like to use them for plein air, so that's what I have. And different brands have different quality of how the paper is attached. So with the Arches brand, I keep finding that it starts to release almost immediately when that first painting I do on there where it gets wet. So I've ended up having to tape the outside edge. And I just am now trying the Winsor & Newton. It's a new brand of watercolor paper in a block, and they have hot press. And their edge seems to be nice and firm, so it's staying well. I've had the same issue with the edge coming up on Fabriano's block. But yeah, so these are really nice. If you're using it, using a block today or just a piece of watercolor paper, You could just make it small. You don't have to use the whole thing, so use it how you'd like. And then I'll talk about a few different blocks in a little bit. So we'll do this first, and then we'll move on from there. Okay?
All right.
All right, so I will pause the video and come around if you guys have questions. All right, so we're going to look at some sketchbooks right quick. You don't have to use a sketchbook when you're working with pen and ink. And the other thing that we will talk about is the paper surface, because I tend to, when I'm working with pen and ink, like the hot press surface over cold press. And I tend to use cold press paper for watercolors majority of the time. I have used a hot press piece here and there, but hot press paper, if you don't know, is basically when they're creating the paper, they put it in a press that heats it, and it's like an iron basically. It heats it and it presses the paper together and makes it smooth. So with watercolor, you can have hot press, you can have cold press, and rough with most brands. Rough would be the most texture. However, Fabriano has their own paper that is in between hot press and cold press, and it's called, shoot, I just lost it, went out of my head because I don't ever use it. I'll go look because I have a piece in there. But the reason I don't really care for that paper is because it doesn't allow me to do some lifting and some other techniques that I can do on the cold press. And the hot press for me is, you know, I either want to go smooth or I want to have a little bit of texture and be able to, oh, it's called soft. So yeah, it's just a little different, and I don't remember if there's anything else about it. And it may be that it has less of the sizing on the soft paper, and with your paper you have sizing because the sizing allows you to, when you put the color on, it's not just going to bleed and move like it would maybe on a paper towel that has no sizing in it. So most watercolor papers have an interior and an exterior sizing, and that sizing can vary per paper, and then also how what is kind of their method of creating the paper can make a difference on how it works. So the a lot of the journals will not necessarily be watercolor paper. It could be paper that is acid free. So I have tried a variety. Let me move these guys first. So my big thing is that if I'm going to be doing something, basically I want it to be archival, so that would be acid free if I can find it. These do not say that they are heavyweight, cold press, surface. Yeah, it doesn't say it's acid free. It says archival quality. This is a sketchbook by Stillman and Byrne, and that's a pretty common sketchbook name. You can find some of these at Hobby Lobby, maybe Michael's, I'm not sure, and then most art stores carry them, or online stores.
At mine, no, Gyrie's,
Okay.
but maybe mine.
Yeah, and that may not, yeah. And I'm trying to think if they do the one here. I can't remember because I don't remember buying one there, so yeah.
I think that's what I thought.
Did you?
It
Okay.
wasn't spiral though.
Okay, yeah, so that's
I think
another
that's
thing.
what I-
They come in varieties, so you can have, this is all Stillman and Byrne, and this one is as well. So they can have the solid, you know, hard cover that opens like a book, and then it's, you know, when you're working on it, you have to kind of press the pages down to get it to stay flat, or put a clip on it to hold it. You can have this kind, the spiral bound, that it's really nice and easy to open up and work on it, and you can also flip it over, which is really handy. And then they have this kind, which to me is one of my more preferred kinds, because you can open it and you could work across the whole thing if you want to. So I did that on this one. Or you could work on a single page. You can work on back and front in these books because they are thick enough that it works. This particular book is by Stillman and Byrne, and it is the Zeta series. The Zeta series says it handles dry and wet media, watercolor, and ink, and it has a smooth surface. And that's what I wanted, I wanted that smooth surface plus that it would handle watercolor. So I was having a hard time finding this one, except I found it through Jerry's Artorama online. And I want to say it was about $9. And it has 26 sheets, so if you use both sides, if you had individual images, you would have 52 possible paintings. So I will pass these around so you guys can see how they feel to you. This paper is, if I remember, it's a cold press surface, but it's not the same as a watercolor cold press. It's not quite as rough. So even though I was using it with ink, it's still okay to, it's not rough feeling to work with it. If you're working with cold press watercolor paper that has a little bit of a bigger texture to it, your pen tends to skip a lot on there, and so it's not as easy to draw on it. The other thing that I did was, for one of the classes I was doing, I did just a quick drawing of my tree out my window on both, and I will turn these around so you can see. This brand is, find it, it is the, I wish they'd mark them a little better. Whoops, here, pages, okay. It is the Handbook, is the company, Handbook, and then it's the Travelogue is this particular book. But when I did a comparison, I'm using the exact same colors for both. See how this one's a little more vibrant? Mm-hmm. So this one may have a little more sizing to the paper, and so the color is going to stay on the surface a little more. And this one, it kind of sunk into the paper a touch more, so it's not quite as vibrant. They both pretty much stayed where I put the paint when I placed it on there. Yeah, so it just kind of depended on my technique, if I was a little wetter on this one to make it a little looser. Oh, that's the top of a bird feeder. I was like, why did I put a can in the tree? So I will pass these three Stillman and Burns around so you can kind of see the difference with these. And it's not that I don't like this one. This is the Zeta series as well, so it's got the smooth texture. It's just a different way of working. So I would have to, I have to hold it down physically or clip it or whatever to get it to stay down. So I'll pass, let's say we'll do that. And yeah, if you want to pass them around. Okay. Let's see if I have.
Oh yeah, feels like Bristol board.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a smooth, a nice smooth surface. So this book is the one that is the Handbook, and it does have a nice, I like that big long layout. I tend to like the look of that, and it is got a little bit of texture to it, so it would be like a cold press surface. And this particular book has a little bookmark in it, and it also has the rubber band, so if you were working on a page and you wanted to use that to kind of help you hold your pages down, you could do that or close the book that way. And then the other thing is, if you're using it as a travel journal, they put an envelope at the back for anything, like if you collect something that you would want to tuck in there, then you have the envelope to use. And it has a soft cover, which makes it, I don't know, just feel good as you're holding it. It's nice. It's not going to slip out of your hands, I guess, as part of it. And it actually, it's all right. It looked like it might be coming apart a little bit, but I think it's all right. It's got a little bit of a creamier color to it than those guys. And I like the whiter tip normally, but, it depends on you and what you like. So this is also a Stillman and Byrne, and it is their smaller size. This is a 3.5 by 5.5, I believe. And so this is really nice because you can just tuck it in your pocket, and it's or a purse or something. It's real handy to have with you. And I think this one is the beta series because it's got a little bit of surface texture to it. So pass that one. And this is the handbook size. There's a little hummingbird with this is the graphite, the gray pen that I like. And then I put a little bit of ink that's colored on it. And so this handbook is probably, again, the 3.5 by probably 5.5. And it's a premier surface, and you can tell by the paper that it's probably more of a drawing paper. It works well with ink, but I don't know how well it would work with water. Well, I have used it with watercolor, but I didn't get real wet with it. So you can tell I've been playing because I have a lot of books that have a few pages started and not a full book yet because I've just been trying all different kinds of books. So I'll pass that one around.
Is this the one that was a little brighter?
Yes, yeah. And it's interesting that it's brighter on a paper that's a little creamier. So even though it's a creamier paper, the color is sitting on the surface a little more on that one. This is a brand, and I have two of these. This happens to be a square, but I have one that's rectangular. And this is Field Artist is the brand, Master Series, and I got these off of Amazon. So Field Artist is the company, and they have probably feels like sort of suede. It's not probably real leather, but it's got a nice feel to the outside of it, and it's a good size. This is 4 by 4, I believe, or 4.5 by 4.5, and so I am going to, there is an online, if you are on Instagram, and maybe a website as well, it's a challenge called Inktober. And so in October, they, this site, people do pen and ink drawings. And so if you're on Instagram, you might look up #Inktober. And so I decided I was going to do it this year. So every day this month I will do an ink drawing, and I decided mine are all going to be birds, even though they have prompts that are just really random. And I figured I'm not really going to follow the prompts. I just want to do my ink drawings. So I've done 2 so far. So I have a goldfinch and the Cooper's hawk over here. And I will be putting some watercolor on these and then posting them on and I'm on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, you can follow me and I'll follow you back. So there's only 2 in here. And so far I like the book. I have not tried this page yet because this has got some texture surface to it. So these first 2 pages were smooth, so I may use a different pen over here. Then, something that's going to let the ink kind of flow out of it, maybe my dip pen or something, so that when I'm working on the rougher surface, it will work over that surface well. So that's that one. And then this last one, if you are crafty and you want to make a sketchbook, I need to do this as a class sometime.
Oh, that'd be super. I would
So,
love to do that.
You take a piece of cardboard, and I bought some material that I liked, and you basically have a piece of cardboard, 2 pieces, and then if you open this, oh, my glue is causing it to go yellow on that page. That's not good. Not archival glue. I can't, oh, maybe I can. Where's, somewhere in here, I have a little piece of paper that basically shows you. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, it's a pocket. There it is. Okay. So this whole thing is one piece of watercolor paper. Now I will explain. So you take your watercolor paper, and if this were a sheet of paper, then you cut it through there, and you cut it through there, and I had to lay it all out and get all the lines right, and then you fold it. And those folds, and this fold right here, where it lays over itself, I ended up gluing those, so that's what these are. That piece right there glued in, and this, and I found a video online, but see how it's turning yellow right there? So my,
Mm-hmm.
actually, I may have tape in there. I may have double-sided tape, but my double-sided tape is acid-free, so I don't know why it's doing that. But basically, yeah, you can create a sketchbook with one piece of paper. And so this is Fabriano hot press watercolor paper. I haven't used it for anything yet because I'm just like, I want to save it for the specific, what do I want to put on it thing. So we'll see. So yeah, it was fun to do, and I don't know, just
That's fun, I like
try
that stuff.
Yeah, oh, I need to put that piece back in there. Because it makes no sense to show anyone unless you have this. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so then a couple books, and then we will move on to doing some of the birds with the hatching, the different kinds of hatching that you could do. There are, for the pen and ink side of things, there's a ton of Urban Sketcher books out there now, and I only have a few of those. So this one's called Arca-Sketcher, and it's about architecture basically. So if architecture is something you like, or if you just like seeing different ways that people work with ink and watercolor or ink and other mediums, this book has a lot of different styles in it, and it's got their information, so like kind of what they do first or what they like about working with pen and ink, and some information about architecture in general in it, and just a lot of different ways to work with it. So it was really one that I like, and I'll kind of pass them around so if you guys want to see those. This one is called the 5-Minute Sketching of Architecture book. And so basically all of the drawings in here, she talks about how to quickly do a sketch, and basically in 5 minutes is what she's trying to do. Now I don't know if she adds the color within those 5 minutes or if it's just the ink side of things that she's sketching within 5 minutes. So yeah, this one is like, oh my gosh, I need to practice a lot before I would be able to do that. And then these are both by Claudia Nice. And she has, these are kind of broken down with how to create textures in pen and ink, and then using watercolor with it. So she's got this one that is creating textures, and it has more nature things, so animals, rocks, walls, landscape type of things, and she shows kind of some of the textures she might use for different things in there. And like this one has the leaf drawn in, and then she used stippling in the background to give it a darker value prior to putting, maybe, let's see what she says, negative leaf print to detail. So she did the marks with her pen after she had put some watercolor in there to give it even more texture and give it some darker value. And she did have a few birds in here. I think one of the front pages, yeah, this front page that's up here is the one that I copied for you guys. So it's from this book that shows the different pelican, right there. So the different techniques with the pelican. Yeah, and so then she has different pen and ink styles in here, and colors and all of that. So there's that one.
Do you think this assumes you have drawing ability to begin with? Not just
Probably,
particular book.
yeah, that particular book is probably a little more advanced, because even I look at it and I'm like, wow, 5 minutes, oh my gosh, especially for architecture, it seems daunting.
Even the urban ones? I think it's
Not all of them.
not-
Yeah, in fact, there is, let me find the postcard because it's one I'm considering getting. I haven't purchased it yet. I actually met the author. Classes and goes to locations to paint. She was going to somewhere in Italy after that, and so she has a book out called The Urban Sketching Handbook, 101 Sketching Tips. So this one has things like tricks, techniques, and hacks for sketching on location. So I think this might be a little more available to someone who's just kind of starting out and and getting used to it. And urban sketching tends to be, from my understanding, it's not necessarily like if you're sitting in a coffee shop, you might be drawing a figure, but most urban sketchers see it as not just drawing the figure, but drawing the atmosphere around them. So maybe some of the walls, some other things that are going on. And there is a YouTube video guy that I like to watch a lot. His name is Teoh, and his blog or his YouTube channel I think is Parka Blog or something like that. I'll have to get the link and give it to you guys, but he does a really nice job of showing himself going to a location and drawing and all of that, so it's interesting to see. And then this one by Claudia Nice is all about architecture and techniques for creating texture with watercolor and pen and ink. And so I will pass that one around too.
Do you know who Randy Hale is?
Uh-huh.
Some of this stuff reminds me of his.
Yeah, I know Randy.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure you did because he teaches at Arvada Center.
Yeah, and just from the Colorado Watercolor Society.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
He's got, it's hard to do
Definitely.
his technique though.
Yeah, he's definitely got a looser style. And so with ink and watercolor in general, most people's styles is going to be looser. And that's what I like about it for myself is that I tend to take hours and hours to do a painting that's just watercolor. So it might be 30 to 40 hours to do a full sheet painting or more. And with ink and watercolor, it is a faster way to work. So I may do some layering. Were you in here when I was showing the paintings of the?
No.
Okay. So this one, I'll show it this way first, just so that let's see if I can show it. This one is done by on the paper surface prior to anything drawn on there. We poured watercolor. And the way we did it in order to have these kind of white edges was to take a spray bottle and kind of lean it on its side and spray sort of like this angle so that you would have places where the water would go and then you'd leave openings here and there.
That's fun.
Yeah, and then you take paint, and I used a red, a yellow, and a blue, and then poured it on, and then you just take your paper and you kind of rotate it and let the colors mix and move.
See what you get.
And then once it was dry, you could start in with your pen if you want to, or you could draw with a pencil, and I probably drew it on with a pencil, and then came back and inked it, and then let the ink dry, and then I came back and put some darker values of the paint in those areas. And I just followed, like if there was purple in that area or green in that area, in most of the areas I followed the color that was there. Some of the areas I adjusted a little bit here and there.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, so we're going to do a bird that way. We're not going to get as involved, but I'll show you how we'll kind of create that. And then this one is using the ink on the paper first. I think I may have drawn with a pencil first, or I may have just started drawing with the pen. I tend to grid things, so this may have been done with a grid prior to inking it. I cannot remember, it's been too long. But I used a thinner pen at the back so it would look like it's farther back, and then as I came forward I used a thicker line. So you can give a little bit of perspective and atmosphere that way. So that's another thing. You might also have ink drawing that you decide parts of it you don't want to put any watercolor on it at all. So you might just put some color in a few places and then leave the ink line, thank you, in the other areas. So this is like the zebra, where I poured color first and let it dry, and then I came back and did the drawing on top of it. And then once the ink was dry, then I came back in and added layers to the drawing. And so it got some depth to it and all of that. And I've got a dinged frame, darn.
It's really pretty.
Thank you. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to have you guys either pick one of the birds that is, let me grab a piece of paper here. Actually, I'll use this one because it'll stay open for me. So pick one of your birds, and you can, as we're working today and in the sketchbooks and stuff, don't worry about having things be perfect. Don't worry about having an exact likeness of the bird. I know everybody is at different stages for their drawing and how long something might take or how they feel comfortable. So if today you're just like, I don't even know if I can, if I feel comfortable trying to draw the head of one of the birds, you can literally just draw a circle or draw a shape. These are other pens that I like, although this one's pretty dry. Uniball, they have waterproof, and a lot of them have acid-free pens. And I just bought some that are that are gel pen, that are supposed to be a little thicker tip. But I tend to sign most of my paintings with the Uniballs. And so on the handout, grab, you can either draw like a circle and try, let's see, like if you wanted to try the scribbly, just try using the scribbly line to fill in that circle. And what they did there was they had the top edge be the lighter side, and then as they came down they started filling in just a little bit more, so you get some darker value. And that's just, if you're looking at these as an idea of a sample, the method of going over an area to go a little darker is what they're showing you there. Okay, so you could either do that way, or you could say, okay, I'm going to pick one of the birds and I'm going to use that bird's head to do these samples. And that is a good way to get yourself comfortable with looking at a bird and going, okay, so if I'm drawing that bird, this is sort of what it looks like. And then the chickadees got a pretty decent head to draw, not too much detail. And goodbye. And then this one's coming this way. Now, if we're going, can't talk. When we go to do some more detailed paintings and actually start painting on our hot press paper, not in the sketchbook, then if you want to take your time and do it in pencil first, you could grid it to get your drawing going, or you could transfer it however you would like to do that. But for the sketchbook side of things, I would say practice is a really good thing to do, and just taking your time to try drawing it, either a quick pencil line or sketching with the ink pen. You can do that. So basically I've drawn the head. Now if I were trying these different methods, okay, so this is the white area of that bird, and then stippling, it would be literally just sitting there and going dot, 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 and filling in. Because this is a dark area, I would suggest, if you have the Faber-Castell set, that you might want to go to a bigger pen. And so using the bigger pen is going to allow you to fill it in a little quicker, and then you could switch pens if you want to try different techniques. Since it is it's like 20 to 3, we'll keep going on this. We'll see where everybody's at. So you don't have to try all of the different line ones, but I would say at least try some stippling, try some scribbling, and then maybe try the contour line one. And then we'll, if you have time, you could do a few more if you want to, but at least do the scribble, the stippling, and maybe the contour line one. So you're kind of using that to get an idea of the different techniques. Okay? All right. Okay, so this one is the one where the pen is not waterproof, and it's that way on purpose. And so it adds a really nice monochromatic way to tone your paper without having to have watercolor with you. And the ones that I have, and there may be other widths of the tips, this is a 0.3 and this is a 0.6. So there's a variety of widths. There's that one, and they're like a gel pen, so they go on really smoothly. So I think I'm going to do the 6. But when you're doing yours, you can try both or you can do one. And I drew the chickadee in, and just with a quick pencil line. And then as I go to ink it, I am going to kind of adjust my lines if I need to anywhere. The pencil line is just sort of a guide, and I like to have a catch light in an animal's eye or a bird's eye, and the eye itself I'm going to fill in pretty dark because I want it to feel like it's dark, but that it's got some life to it. So I make sure I put a little highlight in there. And then because these are feathers, the line, you could just draw a line that's really solid, or because these have a little bit of, they're not perfect, they're not smooth, I kind of like a broken line. And just draw that in. And then there's a little bit of a dark patch right at the back. Now, I would probably draw the whole bird in, but just to show you, so for this pen, I'm going to use little kind of scratchy marks. If you want to do a different style where you're using one of the other ink styles, you can do that. Just this goes a little faster than some of the other styles. But you might want to do the, the little scribbly mark type of line, and that would work as well. And I'm following the direction of the head, which way the feathers would be laying on the head for this kind of mark. Okay, and then I'll just quickly go down, do this. Same thing here. And just a few marks where there's some lighter areas. Sometimes that just gives you enough information that there's something there without having to overdo it. And then this is a little darker right in here, but it's not, I don't think it's quite black. Let me see. This guy, no, it's just a darker gray. Right there-ish. Let me see if I can get this up and have it be seen somewhat. Okay. Okay, and then as it comes down right in here on his back, there's a dark area where he's probably got a feather, or part of his feathers that are a little more raised. So in some areas I'm just using the pen just to outline that area, and then in other places I'm actually filling in. Because these feathers right here are a little darker, I want to put a few more marks in there, and then I'm going to kind of go opposite of the edge there, right up in there, because I know that's going to change when I put the water and brush on it. A few longer feathers right up in there. And then as I'm looking at this, he has some shadow right up in here under the belly, and I'll use that same kind of scribbly mark, just maybe a little lighter as I'm coming around the feet. And Trying to keep the paper up where you guys can see it. Okay. And then there's just a lot of his feather lines in here. And it's darker right here at the bottom. And then there's actually a shadow right there. So all of those things are, this tail needs to be longer than what I drew it as, are things that I'm looking for. So shadows, any value changes, if there's some lines, just to give it the feeling that there's some long flight feathers or tail feathers in there, I use that method. Do that, and then maybe just a few lines down in here to give it some texture going on. And then his legs right quick, or his feet. They have, depending on the bird, these guys have 3 toes in front and 3 toes in front and 1 at the back, which normally you can't see all 4 unless it's curled around a thinner branch. And you might see the tip of the 3rd toe. Okay, and then just quick. And if I were going to do this like I did over here, I would put some shadow in for the underside of the branch that I was seeing on the photo as well. So I would put all that on there with the pen. And then once you have whatever you're going to do mark-wise, then if you come in with your water, then the water then helps you fill in that area to give it the value. And you could, if you're coming back, maybe there's a highlight on the head right there, you could skip an area and then put the color farther back if you need to. If that's not dark enough, then you could let that dry and then come back in with some more pen if you want to go darker. And I forgot to put anything on the beak. We'll see if I can get a little bit of color there. Some highlights. And then because I still have some of that ink on my brush, I can use it down here, even on places that I don't even have any ink, just to give it a little bit of some value. And there, and you can go over those lines. You don't have to go over every line either, so use the water to help you put some color where you want, or some value, some tone, I should say. Okay, so that's a little lighter on the upper edge, and then it's darker down in here. And what's nice about the Pentel pens is that you can still see the line when you're done, whereas some pens it just bleeds and you get a blurry look to the line. The line here stays. And I want this to have some shadow compared to the lighter area that's up in there. And this is in shadow. Down. And then back here, shadow, and actually the upper part of that was, I should have left that light, but that's okay. No one's gonna know. You're not going to see my photo. Okay, and then just some marks under the branch, and then he's done. Yeah, so I think it's a fun way, it's an easy thing to carry. So if you had this in either a brush or a water brush, the kind that has the water in the tube, it's a quick way to do a ink drawing and feel like there's a little bit of watercolor aspect to it. Now, once this is dry, there are places that once the ink has dried, it doesn't re-wet. So let's see if I can get any off of there now. So if I go back up into there, it's barely coming off. So after you've touched it with the water, it kind of sets it. So then you could let this dry completely, and if you wanted to come back with some watercolor over it, you could then put some watercolor around it. If you have not touched a line, like I didn't touch this front line with water, and I bring watercolor up to it, it's going to actually move that line a little bit. And so this is burnt sienna. I don't think it's on the camera, but that's all right. I'm pulling burnt sienna and a little bit of cobalt out to make sort of a gray brown for the back. And if I come up next to the bird and then touch that edge, it's going to move the ink into, so let me pick a different color so you can see it. I'll put some blue in there. Let's see if that will show you. So if I put some blue on there, the gray line that has not been wet, when it gets touched by the watercolor, it's going to mute my watercolor a little bit. It will put a little bit of that gray into the watercolor, which for this doesn't hurt anything. And so this is also a way you can work with it, is by doing your ink drawing, you can put some watercolor around the ink or in parts of the ink without having to completely get rid of the ink. Or, you know, I don't have to paint the bird. I could just put some color around it if I want to. Okay? So I will have you guys do that one. We've got 20 minutes, so if you want to get started with it, even if you just, there's 2 pens to borrow. If you're doing something else right now, you're welcome to keep going, and then I will have these out next time so you can finish that. If you have not done the pencil drawing, you could at least get the pencil drawing going for the chickadee, not the hummingbird, and then you'll be ready next time to do it in class. Okay? All right.